Welcome. Hello, Selina. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I really loved Single Mother by Choice. I know that you were obviously inspired by real events, but what inspired the character of Eva and specifically the concept of, doing it on her own?
So, well, two things. One, she's an alternate version of me. I've always been someone who is really determined. And for a long period of my life, I was a very intense workaholic and almost to the point of not doing a lot of things I should be doing for myself. But also, I really always wanted to be a mom. I actually remember when I was 15 years old, I told my dad if I hadn't found the right person by the time I was 30, I was going to go ahead and have a baby by myself. And my dad was like, okay, sit down, calm down. Like you have 15 years and more you have to think about. But the thing is that to me, having a baby has been something that I know is just like a number one priority in my life. And I always kind of figured like, I'll find a partner or I won't. But regardless, I'm going to be a mom. So like, I just was decided about that. And when we started looking into it, so my husband had actually worked at an IVF clinic and he had met a lot of women this is actually like a really big movement. Right. There's a lot of women now, and this is a movement that's growing. And so he had interviewed a lot of women who had gone through this process. And I myself, being a woman who was sure I would do it, whether I found a partner or not, we thought that this was a really interesting theme to explore, kind of making that decision and just wanting to be a mom,
I love that. And obviously Dan has been an important partner for you, in life and in your career. So how did you both collaborate on the story when it comes to the writing or when it comes to the decisions of like framing the narrative?
Yeah, so we write everything together. So we outline together, and then usually, and we've been doing this for a long time. So I'm faster in terms of, so I write everything and then he fixes a lot of what I write because he's much more detail oriented and he's much more, he's more of a perfectionist than I am. But, we're always looking at the story together. So every step of the way we were looking at the outline. We had to rewrite this outline probably like 30 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because the world kept changing. So the movie kept changing. So what we had initially thought we were filming is not the movie we made. But that's because so much happened in the process that shifted the narrative. Even, my miscarriage, I actually had a miscarriage in the process.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was awful. But it was also something that we realized we had to include in the film because again, it was something I felt, people don't talk about enough. And it's incredibly common. And once you do start talking about it, then everyone starts talking about it too. And it turns out that there's a lot more people out there going through this than, you realize. And so we just started shifting things as things were coming in and, things were happening in my pregnancy and the world was changing. So a lot of re-outlining.
Yeah. I mean, of course, like you're writing or you're telling a story about a pregnancy in the pandemic, still in the pandemic. We're not out of the pandemic yet. How did those constraints change things for you guys, like physically speaking, when you came to filming?
So, well, first of all, we had no idea we were telling a story about the pandemic when we started it, because we never thought in a million years there was going to be a global pandemic. We had already shot like a third of the film.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And we had to trash a lot of it. So because we had to re-outline and we had to reimagine the film. So we had a crew of around like 25 people. And then we paused obviously when everything shut down. And I remember everyone saying, in 2 weeks, this will all be over. And you can pick up where you left off and start your production. And then as time kept passing, we kept realizing like, no, this is not going to end in 2 weeks. And so we decided to include the pandemic. And then we did everything, like Dan and myself, my husband and myself, we did every job, which was insane because we couldn't put my baby in danger. So, because this was a real pandemic and, in that moment too, this pandemic, I actually have a friend of mine who just had a baby right now. We were talking about how different this pregnancy in the pandemic was to my pregnancy in the pandemic. Because the version of the pandemic for me was so much more of like a zombie apocalypse than it feels like now, even though now we're still all in it. It's like, now there's vaccines. Now that all these things, we didn't even know how it was going to get resolved. We didn't know if there was going to be any solution. We didn't know if we were ever going to leave our house again. You know, it really felt like the end of the world. So
definitely. Now, one thing I love is how Eva's story kind of works backwards, right? Like she's already a self-sufficient woman at the start of it, and it's almost about learning to accept help, as opposed to where many stories might start with someone in desperate need of help. Obviously, you are someone who knows how to work with others, as we can see that. But was that a lesson you had to internalize for yourself, or, you know, an obstacle you just gave to her?
No, yeah. So I think one of the things I've had to learn in my life, so I've always been someone who, you know, and this is something that I'm now, you know, have shifted because I've evolved and I've changed and I've learned. But, you know, 10 years ago, I used to really believe I had to do everything on my own. Like, I really felt like, you know, you can't trust people. You have to do it by yourself. Like, you just don't know what you get. Like, and I was very much like a self, you know, you know, and it's interesting because I think with the years, one of the biggest things I've learned is that vulnerability is actually a strength and not a weakness. And I think that as women, we're constantly being told, you know, don't show your vulnerability. You know, don't say that you don't know the answer. Don't say that. God forbid a woman doesn't know the answer. Oh my God, you're gonna get fired. You know, and it's like, I actually think that it's the opposite. I think that what I've come to learn, and I think the world is coming to understand as well, is that there's so much strength in knowing when you don't know, in asking for help when you need it. In I think being a good leader is taking advice, is listening, is letting other people jump on board, is collaborating. All the things that we're kind of told, like, well, as a woman, you have to just be so strong and never cry and never show anyone that, you know, you have feelings. God forbid they know you have feelings, you know, and I just don't believe that that's the reality of what the best boss looks like. And so I really wanted to explore this idea that, like, vulnerability is strength, and you know, you can do anything you want in your life, but being able to ask when you need help is incredibly valuable.
Definitely. Not exactly the flip side, but you have done, you've been very hands-on in every aspect of your career, right? You've done acting, obviously, you've done producing, writing, even casting, clearly. So what was like the first passion, you know, and how did it lead you to this trajectory of, you know, a master of many trades?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's interesting because, so I actually started out as an actor, like 15 years ago. And I literally took myself out of the equation. Like, I remember coming to LA. I grew up in Mexico. So yeah, I'm half Mexican, I'm half American. And I grew up in Mexico. And I remember in Mexico, I used to book everything all the time. It was like a lot easier to book things. And then moving here, I remember I was in this, you know, room in this audition, and everyone looked like me. Like, you know, they were more attractive and their resume was longer and they had been doing it for years. And, you know, all of a sudden it just felt like, what am I doing in this room? Like, clearly I don't stand a chance, you know? So I kind of took myself out of the equation, and I was like, well, instead of trying and in my mind, you know, like begging someone to give me permission to show what I can do, I was like, I'm going to be a producer and I'm just going to make things happen because I know I'm good at making things happen. And so I actually went to AFI as a producer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's where I met Dan, and he was there as a director. And then I started writing. And then I was like in this like very future oriented kind of moment in my life where I had kind of hit a wall because I was constantly feeling like no matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. I was constantly looking for the results. You know, it was like, well, if I do this, then I'm worthy of this. And if I do this, then I'm worthy of that. And I just felt really exhausted. I felt like exhausted with myself. I felt like nothing was ever going to be good enough. And I remember telling Dan, I just kind of want to play again. Like, I want to remember what it feels like to just have fun and play and not be like so serious and worried about what happens. And so at that point, I joined the Groundlings, and I started doing some stand-up, and I started going to some acting classes. And from there, I'm actually never going to forget this because it was really like a turning moment in my life. Was I did this show for the Groundlings, and a friend of mine who at the time worked for the Duplass brothers came to watch the show, and she was like, I'm producing this series, and I would love for you to audition for this series for the Duplass brothers. It was like a digital series. And I was like, well, I haven't auditioned in 11 years. And she was like, yeah, but I just saw you. And fantastic. So what do you lose? And I was like, okay. And then I booked it, which blew my mind because, as you know, I've also been doing casting for like 10 years. Right. So like, I know what the probabilities are that I could have booked it. So I was like, I felt like I literally like looked up. I was like, okay, universe, like I will continue. Like it was like such a weird, but also amazing experience, because then it opened up this door. Like, wait a minute, who said I wasn't good enough? I did. But like if I decide that I am, then maybe I am, and so then I just started kind of incorporating all of that into everything I was doing and just writing things that I would like to play.
I love that. I mean, and that actually leads into what was my next question was going to be, which is for Two Hands, or for, what you produce, what are the projects that call to you? What is it that, like, the kind of stories that you want to tell? So I love stories, and I'll say Two Hands does, a lot of different things, but I would say me personally, I love stories about very complicated women. I love stories about women who are very strong in some ways and have huge blind spots in other ways, because I just think that the more we can explore our flaws and see what's beautiful about them, but also how we want to grow, like the more like that to me, like I much rather watch someone who's totally three-dimensional, incredibly flawed, super self-aware in some ways, and then completely unaware in other ways. That to me feels much more like real to life. So those are the kind of, people I gravitate towards, and the characters I gravitate towards. I love that. And then to fill in the rest of the cast for Single Mother by Choice, what were the qualities that you guys were looking for in your coworkers?
I mean, we wanted, well, first of all, initially it was all just about people we think are really authentic, we think are really good actors. We found a lot of people we had worked with before. So we love kind of working with this. And when we like someone, we have a good dynamic with someone, and we like working with them again and again. But what was so interesting about this film was that I don't even think we realized when we cast all these people that all these people had to be so down to be creative about how they were going to keep showing up on screen. My co-lead, my friend, she's actually my friend in real life, but she plays my best friend, Brittany Hall, who's, been on Ballers, and she's amazing. She actually just got nominated for a Gotham Award.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, for her new movie, Test Pattern. Anyway, but the point is, she literally moved to Texas. And then our producer moved to Portland. And like, it was like everyone was just moving. Like, and it was like crazy, because it was like, and granted, we were already working with so many constrictions, right? It was like, I couldn't be in a room near someone because of my pregnancy. Right. But we still had scenes we were thinking of doing in like a socially distanced way. And then ultimately we had to just really figure out how to keep the story going and work with everything that was going on with everyone's schedule, because everyone's life changed. We never anticipated that. And it would have been very easy for a lot of these actors to be like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, this is a global pandemic and I need to go home and hang out with my mom. Like, I'm sorry, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, it blew my mind that everyone kept showing up for this. And that we kept finding ways to get their scenes and to film them in different creative, ways we never imagined.
In that way, it is almost like a time capsule of just like how, like, it's realistic to how we did have to work in like any field, right?
Exactly. So, 100%. Yeah. And we joke about that. We're like, oh man, there were so many like Zooms or FaceTimes, but that's what the pandemic felt like. I mean, my life was a lot of that, because I really wasn't interacting with almost anyone in person.
Right. Yeah. That's so crazy. Wow. Oh my gosh. Now I feel like I know, what do you hope that audiences take away from this film, or what have you taken away from yourself now that it's all over? What sticks out the most for you?
Well, what I hope audiences take away from this film is that, being an empowered woman comes in many different shapes and forms. And I hope that people can see this movie and see this person really going through this on her own, and see this person really longing for company, all of it as strength, versus, a sad character who had to go through this. I actually don't think I don't see her as a sad character at all. Right. I actually see her as someone who, against all odds, is constantly finding a way to keep going and to keep growing and to keep making it work. And I think that, I just want to empower every woman out there. And there are so many single moms by choice or not choice, and it's like, and I now have my baby who's 14 months old, and he's amazing, and I'm so happy, but it is a lot of work. And I just, I really want to shout out everyone who's doing parenthood in every form, because it really takes a lot.
Right.
And I think for me, one of my biggest takeaways is that, you have to follow your gut. And if you feel like you shouldn't give up, then don't. Like every single person and people who love me really dearly and really believe in me, everyone was like, just shut this down. Like,
oh no.
It just felt like such an impossible task. Right. And I think people just felt like, why are you trying so hard to finish something that, like, God knows where it's going to go, what it's going to be like, like, just let yourself relax. Like, you're pregnant, it's a pandemic, like, but we really felt like we wanted to keep going, and we did. And we were so lost in so many moments, but we kept trying to find it again. And now it's going to be on HBO Max.
Yes.
It just blows my mind. And it makes me feel like, for all those people who don't know, or who feel scared, or who don't have the answer, it's like, if you have the intuition to keep going, then you will, then keep going and you'll find it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then don't. But like, don't stop for other people.
Absolutely. That is very inspirational. I am going to use this message in my own life. And finally, what project is next for you? What would you like to do next?
Well, we're actually writing a script right now. We just got hired to write a script. Yeah, that I'm very excited about. I'm not sure if I can say exactly what it is, but it's about a very, it's based on a very famous Instagram character.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So
very interesting.
Really exciting. So we're already doing that right now.
Yeah.
And that's been really fun. And then we have a couple of other, TV shows and movies that we're pitching. So we'll see, but I think, just good stories and strong women is what I'm into.
Well, congratulations on this film, and lots of good luck for future career endeavors. You both are wonderful. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.